Okay. Take 2 of this. So, this is kind of my first kick at this can, so I'm a little nervous, can you tell? So, let's discuss RWBY, shall we? Rooster Teeth's magnum opus, hit show, whatever you want to call it. And discuss it as, think of this as kind of a review type of thing, and yeah, let me know how what you think. So, I find it interesting that Volume 1, upon going back through it, was... Okay, let me start again without my hands covering my face. Okay. I find it interesting that Volume 1 ended up being better than I remember it being. It was one of those situations where I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it was. Now, it's got its problems, that's for sure, and we'll discuss those. But I found a lot to actually like, and, it kind of helps that there's a lot of hindsight. So, and what's funny is that doing this in the kind of style of TheLorerunner, which, and Runner kind of helps. So, my notes are a little more, I have a lot of them, so I got 1, 2, 3, put it over this way, 2, 3, and 4. So I got quite a few notes, so we'll see how long this ends up being. So, I'm not going to start with that. I'm probably going to actually just save that first note for Volume 3, where it's a little more relevant. So let's start talking about the man behind this series, Monty Ohm himself. Now, I find myself in a very similar situation to what TheLorerunner himself, and by extension SF find themselves in each time they discuss Star Trek. Specifically, the original series, and more relevant for lore right now, Star Trek The Next Generation. And that is, well, much like with Gene Roddenberry having passed away way through the run, Star Trek The Next Generation's run, Monty Ohm tragically passed away in 2015, and that makes it, kind of makes it so that I'm walking a tightrope, which sadly I'm actually walking more of one than you might think, because, well, the whole thing that sparked this video and this review in general, sorry if I keep looking over, I've got a second monitor to make sure everything's fine, but anyway, the point is that Monty tragically passed away in 2015, and that has caused a bit of a, shall we say, a divide that I'm not going to talk about in this video. I'm probably going to save it for later. Suffice it to say, for now, I'm kind of walking a tightrope, and I'm just going to lay down the groundwork right now. I'm just going to critique this as if he were still with us. Sound fair? Okay, cool. So, let's talk about Monty's background before he ended up working with Rooster Teeth. Well, Monty was known for... he was a fan animator, basically. He had his own little mini animation studio called Monty Ohm Productions. And they did some small work here and there. And he actually had interestingly enough, I found this, of course, this info comes from Wikipedia, so how accurate it is up in the air. But he apparently did some work as a combat advisor on the Afro Samurai video game, aside from his more well-known works, which, anybody who knows about Monty Ohm knows about Dead Fantasy and Haleroid, I believe it is. It's like, I'm probably getting that wrong. I don't care. Now you might be tempted to say, okay, Blue Wolf, what are Dead Fantasy and Haloid. I mean, Dead Fantasy sounds like some kind of weird horror thing, and Haloid is so blatantly obvious to be like a fan fiction of Halo and Metroid that's kind of ridiculous. Well, they were a crossover fighting series that Monty did, with Haloid being obviously Samus Aran and Master Chief fighting each other, and Dead Fantasy, the one I'm more familiar with, honestly, was a crossover fight between characters from the Dead or Alive series and Final Fantasy, with Naminé and Kairi from Kingdom Hearts thrown in for good measure. Now, Monty would be the first one to tell you he was not a writer, which is kind of evidenced by the fact that both Naminé and Kairi are in Dead Fantasy, and they're both wielding Keyblades. Now, granted, if you actually thought about it, you could come up with an excuse, hand wave, whatever, for it, but, that was always kind of his thing. That's why when it came to doing work for RWBY, he kind of handed off writing, the writing to Miles Luna and Kerry Shawgrass. Speaking of which, RWBY itself started as kind of a dream that he had one day. He was, according to the Legacy of RWBY featurette on the Volume 3 DVD, he was working late, and then he just kind of came into the office, still kind of tired, and talking about a dream he had. He goes to his coworkers, and he's like, I had a dream. Red, white, black, and yellow. Yes, Monty, those are colors. Carrie is like, yeah, Monty, those are colors. And it's like, no. That's a team. Okay, go back to sleep, Monty. But then, now this is the part that's actually surprised me personally, because I guess I misremembered it, or whatever. But they actually were enthusiastic about the project when he went back and said, hey, we should make an anime. And they were like, yes, let's do that. And then they started work on RWBY Volume 1. Which is funny because in that very same featurette, Carrie himself actually mentions nervousness he had of when Volume 1 debuted at Rooster Teeth's convention, RTX, which, was it the first one? I think it might have been the first one, but regardless, at one of their earlier RTXs, because there was essentially he said that there was like a 5-second delay between when the episode ended and when the audience applauded. Now, that may not sound like a lot of time, but allow me to demonstrate just how much it feels in real time, right? Okay. And then then the applause. Now, that doesn't seem like very long, but when you're nervous, even the most minute amount of time can feel like an eternity. So, I'm not too surprised there. And then, of course, they were, because of their enthusiasm showing through, Volume 1 was a pretty good success. Now, you might be wondering on the title, I guess it would be below me, but both, and there's my phone going off because I forgot to put it on silent. Give me one sec.
Yeah, if you just edit it too.
Yeah, but I don't think this will take me yes, I can edit it, but it'll only take me 2 seconds to put my phone on silent. So there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so you might have noticed that this is a review of Volume 1 as a whole. Now, if I'm doing this now you might be thinking, okay, you're doing this in the style of TheLorerunner, Blue Wolf. Why Volume 1 as a whole? And why is my phone going off again? I put you on silent, damn it. For a reason. Okay, you. Go away. I might actually edit that one. Who knows? Anyway, for real this time, my phone is for sure on silent now. Well, it's on vibrate, but I don't care. Now, you might be tempted to ask, okay, Blue Wolf, why Volume 1 as a whole and not episodically like Lore would do it? Because doing Volume 1 specifically episodically would be a goddamn nightmare. And, well, at the time of this recording, Lore has just started his little, what he calls mini ruminations, right? Well, imagine full episodes of my show being about as long as one of those. And you get why I'm not doing that. It also doesn't help that each individual episode has, varying lengths over the course of its run. So you'll have, one episode being, 16 minutes, you'll have another one be 13 minutes, you'll have another one be 7 minutes, and you'll have another one be 4 minutes. Yeah, not doing this episodically, especially considering I wouldn't have that much to talk about, individually. I mean, I've only got 4 pages of notes, as I said, and that's me talking about the whole thing all together, so shrug. Now, I am also going to be talking about the color trailers. Now, I know, for those not in the know, you're looking at me like, really, Blue Wolf? The color trailers? You're talking about trailers in a review of the season? Well, to me, the color trailers are more like character shorts, and I will be talking about the character shorts in conjunction when they show up. Which is funny, because that's only in literally 4 volumes so far. Volume 1 with the color trailers, Volume 4 with the one that I'm probably going to have nothing to say about when I get there, and Volume 5 with its 3, and then the one for Volume 6, which was the Atom one. Anyway, so yes, I consider them part of canon. Although, to be fair, if I feel like something should have been in the series, well, yeah, the series isn't going to get credit for putting something in a character short, or in, say, a manga that should have been in the original series. Like, the reason why Yang gets pissed off whenever you mess with her hair, for example. Just to name one right off the top of my head. So, each of the color trailers were released kind of separately to kind of build, to build, I guess, hype and hoip of, to get people invested in there. So I'm going to be taking a look at each one individually. I don't have much to say about, well, all of them, really. I mean, it's funny because the ones I have the most to say about have 4 notes each, which is funny because the white trailer actually has the least amount of notes, believe it or not. So let's start with the red trailer. Now, admittedly, I don't have much to say about the red trailer itself, except just rewatching it kind of puts some things into perspective with the benefit of hindsight. So, my first note is actually about story in music. Now, the composer, Jeff Williams, is great. His music is really good. It really helps the series. You've probably heard that at nauseum from people who have talked about this series, so I won't go too in-depth into it. I have heard some complaints that Jeff Williams, the idea is that there's more story in the music than there is in the actual series, and that's not exactly hard to see why people would say that. But honestly, I think if it enhances the story and just kind of adds some flavor to it, then I'm all for that. But I agree that, the story of your series should be in the series, not in the soundtrack, if that makes any sense. And I should be careful because I'm probably shaking the frickin' webcam too much. Okay, so my next note simply reads, Summer Rose. Now, for those not in the know, the main character, Ruby Rose, originally when Monty created the series, did not actually have a firmly established backstory, and it was actually Jeff Williams, from what I understand, that actually suggested, well, put her mother in there, and thus Summer Rose came into existence. I'm just going to come out and say it. Yes, I'm one of those people that want a Team Stark flashback, because I think that would be awesome. Maybe that's just me, and a whole bunch of other people, but yes, I think a Team Stark flashback would be good. Now, what's funny is I'm actually in the middle of the extremes of opinions. You have some people that say, oh, it should only be 1 or 2 episodes, and then you have people that would want an entire volume of the Stark flashback. I'm kind of in the middle. I would want 3 to 5 episodes to just kind of flesh out that backstory. And actually give us some backstory and some definitive answers to certain questions that I'm not going to bring up here because, well, that's spoilers for later videos. Alright, so my next note is about the Grimm, the creatures that RWBY is slaughtering in the Red trailer. You may notice that they do not look like the creatures that are in the volume proper. Well, that's because they're retcons. And I'm just going to be honest with you, I kind of headcanon the Red trailer enemies to be Grimm, but just of a younger variety. To me, it just makes more sense. Although, what's the problem with that is that Volume 4 will actually show the birth of a Grimm, and it will come with the freaking bone mask already on its face. Throwing that idea out the window a little bit. Shrug. I've got nothing. I don't know. There's a lot of retcons in this series. Speaking of retcons, my next note is about nerfing RWBY, because in the Red trailer, and admittedly through much of Volume 1, she's actually pretty competent and pretty skilled in combat, barring some exceptions, like in players in near the middle when they're fighting the giant Deathstalker, when she goes after the giant Deathstalker and just gets pinned to the ground by the giant Nevermore. The problem is that, well, I'm all for having moments where RWBY is not super powerful, and believe me, I do. The extent that she will be nerfed to are just egregious. I know I shouldn't plug other YouTubers that talk about RWBY, but, the YouTube channel Unicorn of War comes to mind immediately with his video, The RWBY Roast. And yes, he's a guy, for those wondering. But yes, it's like, okay, pardon my language, I'm kind of got a potty mouth, so please excuse me on that. But I have to agree with Unicorn of War when he says is that RWBY in Volume 5 has become about as effective as a fucking Bulbasaur. Just, yeah. I seriously think that by the what most people consider the fifth season, she should be a little more. She should be at least a Venusaur, if not a Mega Venusaur by that point. Although if you go by Pokemon logic and have each game be a season, or each generation be a season, I should say, then she should at least be a Venusaur by now. But yeah, because Mega Evolutions did not get introduced until Gen 6, but now I'm getting off track. And yeah, I literally don't have much to say. I've mentioned, music, story and music. I've mentioned Summer, the Grimm, all of that. Wow, I'm actually progressing through this faster than I thought. I've actually only been at this for 20 minutes. And a bit of that is probably going to be cut out. So next up is the White trailer. Weiss Schnee. Okay, I am going to save my complaining about Weiss for a bit later. All I'm going to say is holy crap. Talk about a character that did a complete 180 in my opinion of them. Because, yeah, Volume 1 is not where Weiss is at her best. In fact, even with the benefit of hindsight, in my blunt opinion, and thinking about all this, it actually makes it worse. But I'm going to try and be as positive as I can, as ridiculously difficult as that is going to be with certain scenes, but I digress. The first note I have is actually kind of my idea for what Weiss's character arc is all about. Because yes, she does go through a character arc from Volume 1 all the way up to Volume 5. Although Volume 5 is kind of iffy because I consider Volume 5, well, I have no other nicer or easier analogy. It's basically Weiss's results screen, is the way I like to think about that. So, yeah. Now, the reason I call my note is labeled Heiress versus Huntress is because, well, she's the heiress to the Shinny Jest Company, but she is trying to become a Huntress. So what we see even in the white trailer, is a nice dichotomy of what her family wants her to be. I know a certain friend of mine is not going to like what I call him, but, between Jacques' father, or Weiss's father, excuse me, that I have lovingly dubbed Jacques the Destroyer. We'll get into that in Volume 4. Don't think too much on it. It's a dumb joke, and you'll realize how dumb it is when we get to Volume 4, but, yeah. The heiress that Jacques wants Weiss to be over on this side, and then the huntress that she wants to be, that Weiss herself wants to be, over on this side. Now, what's interesting is her character arc will take a very Star Wars-y approach, and that's, and now that I'm actually recording this, I think I am going to leave it at that. So, let's talk about Aura, because it's interesting to me that I don't think Weiss is actually using her aura in the white trailer. The reason why I say that is the scar that she gets, I always forget what side it's on, but, the scar on her face, because, yeah, aura is kind of one of those things where it's been well-defined and ridiculously poorly defined, to the point where there's actually some debate about whether or not it was retconned in Volume 5. For the record, yes it was. Volume 2's World of Remnant literally said that it was a passive shield. Granted, I like to come into the middle of this and just say it's a passive shield that you activate. When you activate it, until it's drained or until, you're at rest for however long, it'll just protect you, right? But, again, well, that's more for later. I just find it interesting because that begs the question, did she know how to use her aura when she fought the armor? It's, which, again, I keep banging the thing, which is interesting to me because if she didn't, it could be her stubborn pride coming in again. And if she did, and if she didn't, well, this could be, what she needs it to be. So it's kind of a give and take with that. Now, let's talk about her semblance. Now, semblances are basically just, well, they'll be described in a later volume as superpowers that everybody gets. Basically, think of them like quirks from My Hero Academia, where it's kind of based upon who you are as a person, and it's basically tailor-made to you. And that, of course, the glyphs are kind of an exception to that, but we'll talk about that in Volume 3, where it actually gets brought up. Then we have, and it's a very versatile semblance. Like, even in the white trailer, we see her hopping around in the air and making platforms that she can bounce around on. It's actually pretty cool. I actually like that, how versatile it is. I mean, heck, she'll literally have the equivalent of time magic, for crying out loud. She will cast haste on one of her teammates in Volume 2. And considering that it's Blake that she cast that on, kind of interesting in hindsight. Other than that, I really don't have much else to say except, well, apparently she has a great singing voice. Which, yes, Casey Lee Williams, the vocalist for RWBY, does have a good singing voice. Well, one of the vocalists, of course, because the male one is usually Lamar Hall. Alright, let's get to the black trailer now. Oh boy, the black trailer. Simultaneously giving me a lot to talk about, and then getting completely wrecked by Volume 5. Darn it, Volume 5, if you make it so hard to defend you. But, taken in a vacuum, the black trailer is actually pretty cool. The problem is that the more we learn about Adam, and the more scenes we see of Adam, the more... darn it, sorry. The more irritating it gets. So, yeah. Now, I find it interesting that the song that plays during the black trailer from Shadows is actually more about the faunus themselves rather than anything to do with Blake herself. Now, obviously Blake is a part of that because, spoiler alert, she's a faunus. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Which, of course, is the first big hint that, yeah, by the way, she's a faunus. But honestly, that's not even that big of a reveal, honestly. So now what's interesting is that I kind of wrote down an interesting question that I admit I know that it's probably been answered somewhere, but the question that I pose is, when do you think Blake decided to leave? Did she decide to leave before the train mission or during it? I'll just give you a second to pause and go to the comment section if you wish to answer that. I'll give you my answer, because my answer is a bit of both. Because in my opinion, Blake did want to see the best in Adam. But as soon as Adam lived up to Blake's word for him, which ends up being spite, well, yeah, it was time for her to hightail it out of there. So my idea was she was thinking about it before this mission, and the mission just kind of cemented it. So the idea being, she was like, okay, I'm going to give Adam one more chance, and I'm going to see if he's going to be on the up and up, and if he's not, I'm out. And if he is still, the Adam that I think I know, then cool. Yep. Blake kinda knows how to pick them in some cases. Because the good ones apparently have to pick her. Yeah. So let's talk about Adam's semblance. We see it as Adam's semblance. We see it as we see it, a kind of, basically it's a give and take semblance, not unlike Yang's semblance, which is kind of funny in hindsight. But the idea is he absorbs kinetic energy in his sword, and then he can unleash that in a powerful motion. For example, that's why the damage that he did in Volume 3 was only the damage he did in Volume 3, and, the damage he did here was as powerful as it was, because he absorbed a giant fuck-off laser, so, yeah. It is a little inconsistent, admittedly, but the more I think about it, the more it's pretty much been consistent. Unlike Aura, because, some people say, oh, Adam's sword can go through Aura, and it's like, well, Aura's been so poorly defined that it's like, if somebody can break the rules, establish the rules before you start breaking them. It's just kind of a neat concept. Now, what's funny is that now that I've actually seen the Volume 6 character short, I don't necessarily agree with my last note about the Black trailer, which is Adam losing his final anchor, which is Blake. Adam, even when I try to give you credit, you just go ahead and screw that up, don't you? Well, I guess that got screwed over, didn't it? Alright. Let's move on to the yellow trailer, then. So, you might notice throughout all of the series that there are birds everywhere. Well, that's for a couple of reasons. The first is Monty birds were his thing. Birds were, kind of his big shtick. Heck, he even had birds in his logo for crying out loud. I've basically hinted that at a character named Raven, who we will be talking about at some point. I don't know if I'm talking about her in Volume 2. I will definitely be talking about her a bit in Volume 3, so I'll probably mention her in Volume 2. But yeah, let's just say I'm gonna save Raven's connection to events for at least Volume 2. And I might spoil some stuff there. So, Yang goes into this nightclub, and she meets a character named Junior. And my note here sums up Junior perfectly. He is the start of superfluous characters. I actually have him as the start of wasted potential, because giving Yang an informant, yeah, that could be interesting, and you could do some good stuff with it. But he just ends up being the beginning of superfluous characters that will have very little relevance on events, and then basically disappear from the story. Even when I feel like they shouldn't. Oh, and his two little twins are basically the same. They will literally have one more scene after this, and it's literally to scoff at Neptune, who we will be meeting in Volume 2. So, yeah. Now, Monty stated in an interview that Yang's biggest weakness, especially during more so during the Beacon arc than anything, was kicking characters. Kicking characters pretty much have the upper hand against Yang, which makes sense if you pay attention to her fight style, because her fight style is more of a boxer. You know, she boxes more than she brawls. And I like that idea. I really do. Because it kind of fits with the very mentality. You know, she goes in for the heavy hits, letting her semblance and her aura take the brunt of it so that she can strike back. It's got its advantages, but yeah, it's going to have its disadvantages too. Now, I mentioned the hair thing because Junior kind of ends up holding a bunch of Yang's hair in his hand, and that pisses off Yang or something fierce. From what I understand, I believe it's in the manga. I believe it's actually in the anthology one. I only skimmed my copy of the Red Like Roses anthology. But the reason is that RWBY likes Yang's hair. Simple, but, I mean, it's effective. Oh, and we also get her eyes changing color when she gets pissed. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's up with that exactly, but, I mean, it is another interesting connection to a character we'll talk about later. And other than that, there's not much to say. She blows up Junior's club, meets up with Yang. They establish that they're sisters. And then the yellow trailer ends with Yang saying that it's a long story. Okay then. So now we finally get into Volume 1 proper, and the end of my first page of notes, finally. How long have I been at this? Oh wow, half an hour. Huh. Not bad. Only 15 minutes since I looked at it last. So, my first note is about clumsy/bad exposition. Now, what I call clumsy, most people will refer to as bad exposition. The as you know concept. Which is funny because it's only as you know, really, because Ozpin is in the conversation. It's a conversation with Ozpin. So, I don't know. Or, who knows, maybe the narrator our narrator here was actually schooling Ozpin on the history of dust. I don't know. It is, admittedly though, that is kind of weird that would have to be a thing. Especially given the idea of when the conversation takes place, which we're not 100% sure on, but then again, there's too much vagueness. I don't really have anything else to say about that opening narration. It just kind of works. It works for me, but for others it doesn't. And no, I don't think the first episode necessarily needs to have any of that. So my next note is actually about one character that we see right at the beginning, where, right after the narrator says there will be no victory in strength. Which is a good concept. I like that concept. But then we're introduced to Roman Torchwick. Now, fun fact, there have been some complaints about Miles and Carrie in recent volumes retconning and, changing things from Monty's vision. Well, what's funny is that there was actually somebody else who was changing Monty's vision as early as Volume 1, namely with Roman specifically, giving him a much larger role in the Beacon arc, which is Volumes 1 through 3, by the way, if you're confused there. Sorry, should have made that clear before. But Volumes 1 but, Roman got more of a role in Volumes 1 through 3 because, well, the fans wanted to see more of him and hear more of Great Haddock's awesome voice acting. And then he got a bigger role up until Volume 3, so there you go. So, who pushed that retcon forward? Heard at the request of the fans? Monty Ohm. Yeah, Monty himself. And there's actually a character that appears later named Velvet. I'm not even gonna, in retrospect, I'm not even gonna attempt to say her last name because I will butcher it horribly. But yeah, that was another retcon that he did. So just kind of something to keep in mind the next time you want to accuse Miles and Carrie of butchering it. My next note talks about how Roman is not a brute. He's more of a thief that is more of a gentleman. So because he goes up to the shop owner and the goons he gets from Junior. Roman briefly appears in the yellow trailer. Hitler talking to Junior. Of course, the shopkeeper's like, freaking out because he's got a gun in his face. And Roman's just like, calm down, we're not here for your money. And then they they start taking the dust. I like that, I very much like that idea. Yeah, because, Roman doesn't strike me as the kind that would just butcher people for no reason and or for fun. That distinction is more accurate to say about the bitch in the red dress that intimidates him, but we'll talk about her later. And by later, I probably mean Volume 2. So then we get Ruby's kind of first main stint into the series, and one of her first lines. So one of Junior's guards is telling her to put up her hands. Of course she can't hear her because she's got the headphones on, which I am jealous that I can't get a pair of those, but whatever. And then, she turns around and it's like, yes? And then the goon repeats his thing, and Ruby's just like, are you robbing me? Yes. Boots him across the store, and then the other goon tries to threaten Ruby. Booted out of the freaking shop window. Love that. It's hilarious, and it's hilarious. It's ridiculous, and I love it. And then Roman's just kind of like, okay, get her. And then she proceeds to kick some ass, which is funny because this is one of the few times where Ruby is actually calm under pressure. And then the pressure gets to her in other places, but I digress. So then she gets saved by Glinda Goodwitch. Now, Glinda, admittedly, is a character that is hard for me to defend as well, because she's kind of a pain in the ass. She seems to exist solely to just nag, and for her voice actress to stir the pot, so to speak, with the thing that I'm saving for Volume 3. So, yeah. Now, what's funny is that Ruby's reaction to Glinda is actually something I wish they actually used, but they won't. And that is Ruby being a fangirl. And the reason why I lament this, especially now in hindsight, is, well, I can name a series that actually pulls the whole fanboy, being a fanboy being a good thing, and that is in Not in, no, it's in My Hero Academia that I briefly mentioned earlier. The character of Izuku Midoriya, aka Deku, is a fanboy, and that is actually used to his benefit, which is awesome. You know. Okay, so Ozpin then shows up and, you know, gives us the name drop, puts a plate of cookies in front of her. She chews, scarfs down, leading to a RWBY skit. I'll probably reference RWBY here and there, but I probably won't mention too much about RWBY. And no, I'm not going to do videos on RWBY because it's a comedy show. You want me to review a comedy? Really? Are you crazy? But I digress. So, yeah, and that was actually a few notes down about the chibi skits. There's a couple of others that are thrown back to, like, for example, the Man with Two Souls book. I'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah. So the first thing that he said, that Ozpin says to RWBY, outside of her name, mentioning her name, is, "You have silver eyes." Oh boy. Okay. Now the reason why I'm groaning is actually because of hindsight. The silver eyes will come into play, but they'll come into play so haphazardly that it's almost, you almost want to just look at that and go, okay, then why did you even bother? You know? Maybe there's supposed to be more to it. I don't know. But, yeah, not a fan, needless to say. So then Ozpin wants to know how the heck she learned how to fight, you know, and shows footage of her kicking Junior's goons' butts. So, yeah. So then she mentions her uncle. And Ozpin literally calls him a dusty old crow. That's my uncle. I was complete garbage before he took me in, and now she's the character that will be nerfed. That seems to happen with a lot of characters in hindsight, now that I think about it. Whether the nerfing makes sense or not. Cough, cough, Weiss, cough, cough. So then, Then Ozpin asks RWBY, you know, what's an adorable girl like RWBY doing in a school designed to train warriors? And this is where we get the first dump of, she wants to be a huntress. Now, of course, we get the bubbly, cheery fangirl response in this one, but later in the volume, she will actually mention how she grew up reading about heroes and stories, and she wanted to be just like the heroes in the books, as somebody who fights for what is right, and who protects people who can't protect themselves, right? I like that concept of RWBY being an optimist, because it kind of just speaks volumes, and kind of also helps kind of that's the wrong word, mitigate how much damage the lack of consequences on RWBY are in the later volumes. Needless to say, she is suffering in later volumes. She just doesn't wear it on her sleeve, kind of thing. Which is funny, because that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that reminds me of Vash the Stampede from Trigun. Not to the same extent, obviously. Oh god, nowhere even near, but yeah. Needless to say. Now, I'm a little all over my... I'm still in the same ballpark of my notes, but I'm a little all over the place, so forgive me here. Then we get some trope subversion, because Ozpin literally asks RWBY, do you know who I am? And I tend to not like this idea, what normally happens. Because what normally happens is that a character will be like, I have no idea who you are. And then it turns out, oh, you're the person that is in charge of this place I want to go to, and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, and it's a big shock. And it's like, RWBY just immediately responds with, you're Professor Osden. You're the headmaster of Beacon Academy. So then they get the formal introduction, and then that's where we find out that RWBY wants to get into Beacon. And Osmond's just like, you want to come to my school more than anything. Well, okay, let's do the cliche of letting you in 2 years early. Now, under normal circumstances, that would mean, the main character would be jumping for joy and be like, yeah, I got in. Yeah, RWBY's not like that. She kind of, how do I want to put this? Yeah, she kind of, she was skipped ahead 2 years, and that was an issue for her. So, yeah. Just saying. Ooh, actually, I just realized I skipped a note. Well, actually, you know what? I'll save that. I'll save that for a bit later, because I can talk about that. Or is it more around here? Admittedly. But yeah, no, she, because, and Yang's, of course, all excited, like, yes, my baby sister gets to come with me to Beacon. And then RWBY's just like, stop. And then she's like, why? Aren't you excited? And it's like, yes, I'm excited. But I don't want to be the bee's knees. I don't want to be any kind of knees. I want to be a normal girl with normal knees. Which kind of speaks volumes to RWBY's mindset. She didn't want to be skipped ahead 2 years. She wanted to get there on her own. She didn't want to be given any kind of special treatment. Which is funny, which is interesting given what we'll learn later, but again, that's something to talk about in Volume 3. He just let the Silver Eyes groan point simmer in the back of your mind for now. Heck, she wanted this. She wanted this so little that she literally will be. We see her literally writing a letter back to Signal for back to her to get back to her friends at Signal. Which, as horrible as this is gonna sound, yeah, I would use Signal Academy to kind of help with character development for RWBY. The reason I say that's horrible is because of, stuff we'll get to later. But, yeah. So then we see 2D art amongst the 3D models, and it just kind of got me wondering a couple of things. One that, my friend Steve there wanted me to comment on, and that was the covers of the DVDs. Because you have illustrations on all but, like, the Volume 2 one. Because the Volume 2 one is, like, a generic group shot in CG. And, yeah, the illustrations look better. It just kind of makes me wonder what the series would look like if it was 2D animated instead of 3D animated. But shrug, I suppose. So then Jean has his first debut. And giving us a very bad first impression. I'll actually talk about him a little bit in a bit too. So I actually lumped these wrong. So then we get what I could describe as an error in the DVD. The intro with the song "This Will Be the Day" is skipped on the DVD. Well, specifically on the Blu-ray. And I just have to ask, why? Come on, it's a good song. Why skip it? I don't know. I mean, even if you shifted it to the beginning of the volume, it would have been fine, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just something that's annoying. So then they get off the boat, they're marveling at Beacon's majesty, and then because Yang wants to break Ruby out of her shell, oh yay, my friends are here, bye, and then it's, my note is literally says uneven animation. I'm just gonna call it what it is. It's crap animation. Because it's literally just kind of a slideshow as she gets farther from the camera, and it's just like, really? I mean, I know that's harder to do than it sounds, but I don't know. It just really bugs me. And of course, it leaves her dizzy and makes Ruby dizzy, and so she topples and knocks over the luggage of Weishni. Yeah, my entire note about this scene is literally just Weiss the rich idiot, as I will call her. Yeah, let's just say I need to temper myself, because otherwise I'm going to be screaming into this poor mic and blowing your eardrums out, so yeah. Anywho, the prime example of her being an idiot in this scene is literally she waves dust around, right? That is a volatile substance, that she's waving around, and which, can be used for elemental attacks and, and as a fight measure. So it's like, what the hell are you doing, Weiss? And of course, because it acts like it's like a powder that forms a dust cloud, Ruby sneezes, and because it's red dust, it initiates fire. Which is just like, really? And then Weiss just starts yelling at her, and it's just like, oh my god, go away with that, did Weiss. Ay, 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 ay. Ugh. So then Blake shows up and just kind of verbally berates her, and I'm like, yes! And then, of course, slinks off, because it's like, no, bye. Take note of Weiss's reaction to Blake's verbal bitch slapping, by the way, and all bitch slapping verbal bitch slapping she gets in this volume, because I'm going to be bringing it up as kind of a point to show character movement, advancement of our character arc in volume 2. So then we get Jean on helping Ruby off the ground. Now, I'm going to be as clear with you guys as I can be. Jean suffers from what I like to call reverse Star Trek film. Kind of has a reverse Star Trek film rule in my interpretation. Now I know, to Star Trek fans, there are no rules when it comes to the movies, but regardless, the Star Trek rule, just as a quick reiteration for something you've probably heard a million times, is odd numbers of movies suck, evens are good. Or even numbered movies are good, odd ones suck, plus Nemesis if they've bothered to see it. I'm in that category for the most part, but I'm all over the place with my opinions on some of them. Well, Jean suffers from a reverse of that, because despite some of the groaning I do like Jean here in Volume 1, and I will like him in Volume 3, and I will feel for him in Volume 5, by memory, of course. But in Volume 4, and especially in Volume 2, he's kind of irritating. Volume 4 was not really is not really that bad by memory, we'll see. But yeah, Volume 2 is just like, I mean, we see it start here, which doesn't help, but oh boy. Yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun. I do like, so that leads me into my next note here. Ruby and Jean kind of show off their weapons to each other, which is funny because in this world, they prefer practicality with their weapons. For example, Ruby's scythe, Ruby's crescent rose, is quite literally another friend of mine, Matt's wet dream, because he likes scythes, and one of his favorite types of guns are sniper rifles. Ruby's crescent rose is both, and it's really cool. I love the scene where she explains that too. It's also a high velocity, high impact sniper rifle. It's what? It's also a gun. And then, of course, Sean just has a dinky sword ready to hand me down. But I like that Ruby just kind of is just like, yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, nobody appreciates the classics anymore. That's kind of an interesting take on it, and I like that. Then there's also his sheath, which also doubles as his shield. So he can have it as his shield, and he can also have it as his sheath. And I like that Ruby comments, wouldn't it weigh the same, though? And John's just like, it does. It's kind of awesome in that regard. So then they get to the auditorium. Now Yang wants to be around her sister, so she departs from John, and it's like, now where am I going to find a nice quirky girl to talk to? He starts to walk off screen, and all I can say is, behind you, you idiot! Because Berenica's is on screen behind you. So then we get an admittedly amusing scene where Ruby just berates Yang for ditching, and then and mentions that she exploded, and then it's like, yikes, meltdown already? And it's like, no, I literally exploded. I tripped over some crabby girl's luggage. She kept yelling at me, and I just wanted her to stop yelling at me, and it's just like, yo! And of course that's Weiss coming up behind them, and it's just like, ugh. You were lucky we weren't blown off the cliff. Oh my god, you really exploded. Yeah, because Weiss is an idiot. So then Weiss basically pulls a legal spiel about the Schneedesk company not being liable for any injuries or damages sustained while using their product, which is just like, I'm not even going to get into that. Just, really, Weiss? Anyway. So then Ozpin comes in, and he says, and he mentions that knowledge will only carry you so far. It's kind of an interesting idea that kind of puts a certain part of Volume 5 into perspective. Because it kind of makes sense that, they would need more than one relic of the relics, which is something I'll get into in Volume 4, where it actually starts becoming relevant. So then they're in the main hall. They basically and it's like a big slumber party, and then it's like, and then Ruby's just like, I don't think Dad would approve of all the boys, though. Oh, and then Yang's just like, oh, I do. Oh, how? And it's just like, the few guys that we get to see. And then Jean walks by in his pajamas, and yeah. Pro tip, Jean, invest in boxers. You have the physique for it. Invest in boxers, damn it. Ay. So then Yang tries to get Ruby to come out of her shell by going and talking to Blake, because she didn't get a chance to earlier. So Blake is kind of antisocial, Ruby's kind of antisocial, and we get some interesting lines that kind of foreshadow other stuff. There's Yang referring to Blake as a lost cause. Keep that in mind for Volume 3 and 4, admittedly. And then, of course, the book she's reading is The Man with Two Souls, which will actually mean it will actually have a callback and some interesting relevance when we get to Volume 5. No major relevance, just kind of a, oh, hey, this was foreshadowed back in Volume 1. And then, of course, Weiss shows up and causes problems, because of course she does. Ugh. Yang just blows, or Blake just blows out her candles and is like, yep, gone. We're done with that. So then we come into Ren and Nora, aka Renora, aka Flower Power. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. This was the ship that if I wanted any of them to be canon, this is the one I wanted to be canon. All of the other ones that involved Ren, I just kind of rolled my eyes at and was like, no, I don't see it. And Nora is a big reason why, because, well, Ren kind of puts up with her bubbly attitude for a good while. Occasionally getting angry with her, but other than that, it's just minor stuff. Which leads me into an interesting question and an interesting topic to talk about. And that's asking the question, do you think Ren is a self-insert for Monty? Now, some people like to point out that, like to say that it's actually Jean that's the self-insert for Miles Luna. Yeah, great way to introduce us to your self-insert if that's the case, Miles. But at the same time, it's an interesting idea to think about, because it's funny, because I don't think Jean or Ren step into, Mary Sue territory. And to be honest with you, I don't know about you guys, but I actually do not instantaneously think a self-insert is necessarily a bad thing. Now, I will grant you, it can be. It definitely can be. But at the same time, I don't think it's automatically a negative, as an aside. And let's face it, for as easy as self-insert characters can be to being, to going wrong, I don't necessarily think they will, right? That's the whole, the automatic assumption that self-insert equals bad, and I don't subscribe to that personally. I mentioned Ruby's shell. Yang's trying to break her out of the shell. Hell. And Ruby's being stubborn. I don't need people to help me grow up. I drink milk. So then we get Pyrrha's first first bit of dialogue, where Weiss is asking where, what she's thought, whether she's, what she's been thinking, has she been thinking about whose team she wants to be on. Pyrrha is the kind of person who just kind of lets the chips fall where they lay. Someone who, I suppose, believes in destiny. I'm being an idiot to fulfill that destiny, but now I'm getting way too ahead of myself. And then my next note is literally about Jean trying way too hard to flirt. Yeah, pro tip for anybody trying to get a girlfriend, don't lay it on thick. Just be yourself, be confident, but don't lay it on super thick. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience with this one. So, yeah. Which is funny because apparently Pyrrha is on the boxes, has appeared on the boxes of pumpkin pie cereal, which Jean had to send in 50 box tops to get a hoodie for, as we'll learn in Volume 4. So, why didn't he recognize Pyrrha? I mean, if I wanted to be cynical and a jerk about it, I could say that he was thinking with a different body part, but I'll leave that at the wayside. It's just kind of something that bugs me. And then, of course, Pyrrha apologizes constantly, and it's just like, ugh. So then we get the landing strategy, and the fact that, and the end of my second page, the landing strategy and non-interference from the officials. It's like, really? You're not going to step in case things get too out of hand? I mean, I get it. The idea is the limitations of Volume 1, but really? I just don't agree with that, honestly. Also, Jean didn't know anything about a landing strategy or wasn't even prepared for the possibility of a landing strategy kind of idea. Yeah, I'll admit it, that bugs me. That just bugs me. But given what we learn about him later in this volume, I guess that should be to be expected. Page 3 of my notes. How long am I been going? Wow, just over in 1 hour? I'm actually impressed just with myself. I mean, I'm going through these quickly, but, and even stuff that I thought would take me longer to discuss isn't.
Yeah.
So, I like the idea of mechanized weapons. Admittedly, we do see a bit of it with Ruby's weapon and with other weapons, but I just like the idea of a transformable weapon. We see it with Pyrrha's spear/rifle. We see it with Sun's weapons, gunjocks, and then we will actually see it with Crow's weapon, which we'll have to wait till Volume 3 for. But hey, I mean, heck, even Roman's cane actually opened up to turn into a gun, so it's kind of interesting. So then Pyrrhus sticks him to a tree, which he apparently can't get down from. I guess he doesn't want to ruin his hoodie or something, I don't know. And then RWBY hits the ground running, and as does Yang, admittedly. Nailed it. Sorry. And, so then she's running through the forest, like, gotta find Yang, and then thinking about, okay, who else could I team up with, I mean, I could team up with Jean, he's funny, I can hold a conversation with him, but I don't think he's very good in a fight. And then there's Blake, she likes books, I don't think I can hold a conversation with her, though. So, okay, who else is there? And then she runs into Weiss, who just takes one look at RWBY and storms off. Which is funny, because my next note is actually about that. So, now, because Weiss kind of has a choice. She can either be on RWBY's team, be RWBY's partner, or she can be Jean's partner. Yeah, she chooses the former. Because of course she chooses RWBY over Jean. She literally does not need a fanboy who will never be able to hide his tinted pants. It'll just be awkward, irritating, and yeah, we'll just leave it at that for now. So then RWBY shows off her semblance a bit, her speed. And so then Weiss gets into a fight with some Grimm after RWBY vanishes. And she overthinks it, which is just kind of ridiculous in hindsight, because the Grimm are literally just standing there watching her. Or go through, remember your training, Weiss. It's like, ugh. And then she gets mad at RWBY when RWBY just sees an opportunity and takes it. Shrug. And then, of course, because she set the trees on fire, we gotta go. And it's like, yeah, because it's not like you have a versatile semblance and a bunch of dust that could potentially put out that fire and fight the Grimm at the same time. So annoying. So, over with Yang for a sec, I do like the idea that they can, that Ruby and Yang's family kind of have a catchphrase, if you will. Nope. I mean, seriously, Yang says it, Ruby says it, and then Crow will say it. It's just kind of an interesting idea. Excuse me. So, then we get the explanation of Aura, which is interesting because Aura kind of has multiple uses, apparently. It's a passive shield that protects you, it helps to increase your senses, and apparently Jean has a lot of it as Pyrrha activates Jean's aura. I also like the idea that the Grimm are soulless. It's just kind of an interesting idea. Which actually leads me to a point that I meant to bring up, but I did not earlier because I am an idiot. I have heard a complaint saying that the Grimm are not scary, and that is to the detriment of the series. Well, I disagree, and my evidence comes from Kingdom Hearts. I've never found the Heartless in Kingdom Hearts scary. I just haven't. Even when they were in bigger and bigger hordes, the only time I ever found the Heartless really even remotely intimidating, admittedly, was the big swarm of Heartless that serves as the final boss of 0.2 Birth by Sleep, a Fragmentary Passage, and wow, that title is a mouthful. But, 0.2's final boss. And even then, that's just intimidation, not outright fear. And some people are saying, oh, the Grimm cause all that devastation in Volume 3, and it wasn't just their own. Well, yeah, because the kingdom has defenses. Because, duh, there's a whole bunch of defenses. Like, how the hell do you think the frickin' kingdoms have stayed active for 80 frickin' years? I mean, 80 years is not exactly a small amount of time. Not really. Where was I here? So then we get some more banter between Ren and Nora. So, after all of Nora's little bubbly, happy, clamoring into Ren, and Ren's only response to Nora's antics, which includes apparently asking Ren if he can imitate a sloth, is, I don't think sloths make a lot of noise. And then Nora's just like, yeah, that's perfect. And then she makes a sound effect as she appears, as she kind of shows up beside Ren. And then it's like, I still don't think that's what a sloth sounds like. Which is funny, because I have actually heard what a sloth sounds like, and yeah, no, that's not what a sloth sounds like. Anyways, and then of course what I've always... a single line that will serve as the name of her theme song. Boop. What? Anyway. My next note is an interesting one, because the relics that they're sent to find and bring back are in the form of chess pieces, which just kind of hints at the chess game that will be played throughout the rest of the series. It's just kind of a neat little small thing that I figured I'd bring up. So then we get Ruby kind of giving us some leader bits, and yeah. And I like that Yang is proud of her sister in that regard, because it just makes sense to me. She does some leadership skills. So then we get the big fight between the Deathstalker, the Nevermore, and the two teams. Because the teams all converge, and I realize I skipped ahead a little bit, but the teams all converge. Ruby tries to prove that she's useful. It goes up against the Deathstalker. That doesn't work. Weiss shows up out of nowhere and saves her, and actively will contradict herself in a bit, but I digress. And then RWBY just kind of naturally takes charge, and while Team Juniper are fighting the Deathstalker, the Scorpion one, the giant bird is fought by Team RWBY, and RWBY has a plan. Okay, use Blake's Gambrel Shroud, the rope part basically, to kind of use it as a slingshot to launch RWBY at the Nevermore, and then use the glyphs to kind of create a wall that RWBY can run in, using Crescent Roses to gain momentum, and slice the Nevermore's head off. I really like that idea. And I love the song that plays during that too, Red Like Roses Part 2. It's just kind of a neat song. And of course, Weiss chimes in with some sarcasm. Only you would come up with a plan like this. And of course, RWBY doesn't recognize sarcasm, so when she's like, hey, of course you would come up with something like this. Think you can make the shot? Huh. Can I? Hey, can you? Of course I can! I love that. It's just kind of a fun little idea. So then the teams are formed. Team Cardinal, ugh. Team Juniper, led by Jean, which is an interesting choice. And then, of course, Team RWBY, led by RWBY herself. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting year, alright, Ozpin, beginning with what is easily my least favorite episode in the entire series so far, The Badge and the Burden. Now, admittedly, the first part I actually kind of like, which is funny because my two notes about the initial parts are actually about Blake. I just like the idea of RWBY trying to coordinate everybody and Blake all being in favor of, efficiency and setting things up. And then, so they go through an entire montage and the room is still a disaster. So then they come up with the idea of, oh hey, let's ditch our beds and replace them with bunk beds, and then I like that Blake is just like, yeah, that would be efficient, and then Weiss is resisting it, which is dumb given what I'll mention in a bit, but And then, of course, there's the Ninjas of Love, or as RWBY will refer to it, or as RWBY will describe it, this is filth! Filth! Smack! Leaving Blake twitching. Can I have my book back? Later! Here. RWBY Chibi sketch, right in the first episode of Chibi, and I love it! I love that skit. I said I would mention Chibi here and there, bring it up, but it just wouldn't have very many things. So then my next note is the Badge and the Burden. Because they go to Professor Port's class, and the World of Remnant that talks about the Grimm is that the Grimm do not last long in captivity. Which I initially thought I was going to bring up as kind of a but then I realized, well, no, he could have just captured it before class. They don't last long in captivity, but, a day is not long, for reference, right? So, Weiss is getting more and more irritated at RWBY's antics, and then when Port asks, who is going to take on this beast, Weiss volunteers. And so she fights the Borbatusk. And admittedly, the commentary is just kind of, just kind of encouragement and stuff. And then, of course, that's not how Weiss sees it. Weiss sees RWBY's commentary as telling her what to do. And so when she delivers some good advice, she wasn't even saying that much, by the way, which also bugs me, but whatever. She's like, stop telling me what to do! And I'm like, you're yelling at her for giving you sound advice, and here's the funny part, Weiss. You use it to defeat the frickin' Borbatusk! Where is your frickin' rapier thing at the end of the fight? Oh yeah, and the frickin' underside where RWBY told you to strike. It just pisses me off that the line that she says is, "Don't stop telling me what to do." Who? I mean, at least if she had said, "I know, Dolt." Well, I know, Dolt, just watch. Which, at least then it would have shown, okay, I know what I'm doing, I don't need you to tell me, thank you. At least then that would have been something. Yeah, you totally deserve to be leader of the frickin' Team RWBY. No wonder you get scolded by Port. Because Professor Port, she goes to Professor Port and she's like, yeah, I think I should have been the leader of Team RWBY. And Professor Port's immediate response with zero hesitation is like, ridiculous. He literally calls it ridiculous, just point blank, immediately. And I'm just like, yeah, no duh. Ugh. Because what's funny is that he points out that Weiss has an attitude. And points out that, she's, that he sees somebody who's gotten what she's wanted constantly throughout most of her life. Which, Weiss has kind of needed to backpedal a little bit. Which, yeah, given that her dad's Jacques the Destroyer, credit where it's due, I do agree she probably hasn't gotten what she really wants very often, but yeah. But I do like her advice to Weiss. Or Port's advice to Weiss. He says, concentrate on being not the best leader, but the best person you can be. And I like that, because that actually is advice that she will admittedly take to heart. And I like that she takes it to heart. Because, heaven forbid, we definitely did not need more. We did not need more Volume 1 Weiss. That's all I'm going to say. And then, of course, she's going to backpedal again, just like she did for this, and ugh. Letting it go. Now, Ozpin's talk with RWBY, which happens at exactly the same time, is actually interesting. Because she literally looks at him defeated and is just like, is she right? Did you make a mistake? And Ozpin just scoffs at it. He just dismisses it. Because he's like, no, this is not one of my mistakes. I'll talk about the actual line he says in a minute, but, this is not one of my mistakes. My point is, what I'm saying is, it's only been one day, RWBY. Give it some time, which is exactly my point to Weiss, but, again, I digress. It's only been one day, and she's shown more leadership skills than you. She came up with the idea for the Nevermore. She rallied the forces against the Nevermore and the Deathstalker, and she was one of the ones that mentioned, hey, our objective's right here, let's grab the objective and get out of here. I guess the idea is that Jean going along with that is him showing level-headedness, but I digress. Now, Ozpin says a line that I always found interesting and always stuck with me. Even when I forgot the context of the line. Ozpin when RWBY asks if this if it was a mistake making her leader, Ozpin literally tells her, I have made more mistakes than any man, woman, and child on this planet. I literally wrote it down and I didn't even need to look at it. Now, of course, like I said, he mentioned that, he would not consider appointing RWBY leader of Team RWBY to be one of those mistakes. And given what we learn about him later, yeah, that is quite literal. So then Weiss, and it comes back a bit later to the dorm room, and RWBY is furiously studying. It is studying, even falls asleep studying. And this is where we learn RWBY's preference in coffee. Cream and 5 sugars. Which, yeah, that is what Weiss will later call ridiculous amounts of sugar. And depending on how big those sugar packets are, Weiss, yeah, I've kind of got her beat at 7, admittedly, in most of my coffees. But that's because I'm not a coffee drinker, so what do you want from me? And some coffees, admittedly, I can drink with no problem, so... yeah, I still don't like coffee, but it is. So Weiss does seem like she's easing up on Ruby, and that will be the one thing that remains consistent, thankfully. And then she mentions that she's always wanted bunk beds. So why resist the idea earlier? Yeah, needless to say, I probably would be putting, which is funny because I'd have to debate whether or not that would be, what would be the equivalent of a lamentation for lore. But whatever. So then we move on to the next part, which is Jean stuff, and oh boy. So we start with Jean fighting Cardin, and he has no finesse or technique. He gets his butt handed to him by Cardin. Ugh. I kind of wish we had seen Jean's fight style actually improve along the way, but we really don't. Would have been great to see that during the Vital Festival tournament until, instead of the stupidest joke I've ever heard, or one of the dumbest scenes I've ever seen, but that's by memory. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, he gets his ass kicked. Not much to say there. So then, Nora is talking about a dream she has, and of course she's exaggerating it, and she, and Ren is correcting her, because of course Ren is the first person she says, which is funny because given how Volume 3 plays out, yeah, I'm just gonna let you know that's foreshadowing for Volume 3. Yeah. So, the next couple of lines I can actually lump in together, because this is where we actually get introduced to Velvet, and of course, our introduction to her is Cardin yanking on her ears, and Team Cardinal, calling her a freak, and then Yasuhashi comes in and beats the ever-loving crap out of them. Sorry. I just really don't like Team Cardinal. Can you tell? And then, of course, they talk to Jean, and Jean is just like, Cardin bullies everyone, and they're talking about, the Faunus being subject to racism despite their abilities, and yada yada yada, and that they learn about in class, and, Cardin's not that bad, and then it's just like, yes, Jean, he is. Which is why when Nora pipes in with, ooh, we'll break his legs! My only reaction to that is, yes, Nora, please. Full force, as hard as you can, and make sure they never work again! I really don't like Team Cardinal, can you tell? But yeah. So, then we have the classroom scene with Oobleck, voiced by Caboose, and he is hilarious. So then he basically makes both Cardin and Jean stay after class, gives them some extra reading. So Pyrrha just waits for him, and then is like, you know what? Here, I'm gonna bring you somewhere so that I can help you out. Which is actually my next note. Now, admittedly, Jean kind of resists this, which is so dumb. And then the truth comes out. He didn't pass any test. He didn't go to any combat school. And, yeah, he got his hands on some fake transcripts. And that's how he got into Beacon. He lied. He cheated Beacon. And the worst person to overhears him, Cardin. Because of course Cardin overhears that. Which is awesome. I'm on my last page of notes. Sweet! Hour and a half. Nice. yeah, is not really living up to, his self-imposed obligation to himself, because he wants to be a hero like his father and his grandfather, and yet he cheats Beacon. Which kind of leads into an interesting point. Did Ozpin know about the fake transcripts? Now, interestingly, when Glinda mentions it earlier, Ozpin kind of gives this, knowing look, and it's like, And it's kind of an interesting look, and I like that, but it just kind of makes things kind of interesting in hindsight. And considering what Ozpin is cheating at, well, yeah. So Carton has Jean on a tight leash, and he's struggling. And Ruby just kind of notices him outside of their dorm room, because their dorm room, Ruby and Juniper's dorm rooms are right across from each other, apparently. And I like that, and this is where Ruby's nopes come into play, because she's really taking Ozpin's advice and trying to help Jean with it. Because, she says it as, we can't afford to be failure. You can't afford to be a failure now, Jean. It's not just about you anymore. It's about your team too. And I think that helps kind of influence Jean's decision. Now, I'll be the first one to admit I do not ship Lancaster. I am firmly in Camp Arcos. I'm just gonna say that as bluntly as I can. So, Carton makes Jean collect rapier wasps, which, kind of shows that there's more wildlife than just Grimm in Remnant, which is interesting. And 6 jars of the sap, which, of course, Carton, being the asshole that he is, just lounges around, and it's like, somebody really needs to break your legs! I don't care if it's Pyrrha, I don't care if it's Nora, I don't care if it's a tag team of both Pyrrha and Nora. Your legs need to break, Carton. So, what Carton's plan is to use that extra jar of sap on Pyrrha, and then unleash the rapier wasps to get back at Pyrrha for being a know-it-all. Ugh. Now, credit to Jean, he decides to choose his team over his time at Beacon, and I have to applaud that. He's just like, no! And he throws the jar at Carton. But of course, instead of the rapier wasp being the problem, an Urson shows up, the bearer Grimm that Nora rode in on during the team selection exercise. And I like that. So Jean ends up trying to fight the Urson, to protect Carton, which just goes to show that he's way too damn noble for his own good. But, right thing, a moral thing to do may not be the right thing to do, but shrug, right? It really boils down to, are you going to be pragmatic, or are you going to be moral? And John chooses to be moral, admittedly. So Team Cardinal run like the bunch of pussies that they are, because of course they are. They run into the others, and they're like, Urson! Back there! It's got Carton! And I like that Pyrrha, despite looking at John with just this disappointment in her eyes, immediately is just like, okay, no, we gotta go help, because Jean's there. And I like that Ruby's on top of things once again, proving that she deserves to be Team Ruby's leader. She sends Ren, Nora, Yang, and Blake all to go get Professor Goodwitch, to get Glinda. And the main reason she gives is very makes perfect sense to me. There may be more Grimm in the area. I mean, Forever Fall is, got a lot of Grimm. I believe that's actually the first area you go to in the game Grim Eclipse, if I'm not mistaken. But whatevs. It was all the same. So then Jean fights the Grimm, and then Pyrrha uses her polarity semblance in order to raise Jean's shield up so that he can block the Urson's swipe and then chop off its head. And then Ruby's just kind of looking at that going, what? And then Pyrrha explains that it's like, well, and then Weiss is just like, how did you do that? And Pyrrha's just like, well, Ruby has her speed, you have your glyphs, my semblance is polarity. And Ruby's, of course, we gotta have a dumb joke with Ruby. Oh, you can control poles. No, you don't. It means she has control over magnetism. Magnets are cool, too. It's like, yeah. It's almost a shame that what I like to call the love triad and or if you prefer fusion Urza Scarlet Magneto is interested in Jean, and he's a complete moron. Ugh. I do like her semblance though. It's kind of interesting considering the one thing that Pyrrha wants above all else is friends and. Well, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but she will mention that when you're a celebrity like she is, people tend to put you on a bit of a pedestal. Yeah. So, so Pyrrha helps Jean man up, and Carton apparently pisses off after this, because Jean cheating Beacon, this is the last we hear of it. Which kind of brings up the point from earlier about, did Ozpin know? It's just kind of an interesting idea to think about. And I did that again, darn it. Okay, time to move into the final stretch. At last. So, we see cops investigating. So, of course, Weiss is all excited for the festival and meeting, and having mixture of cultures. Okay, I'll give you that one, Weiss. Then we see that cops are apparently... Yeah, cops are an interesting breed in Vale because they kind of suck. Now, admittedly, I was going to say that cops are incompetent in the entire world, but then I remembered Volume 5, and, well... We'll get there when we get there. So Weiss is quick to point out the way to pin the blame solely on the White Fang, and is talking shit about the White Fang like they're nothing but this extremist group. It's dumb. It is dumb. I feel like she's just being a little too judgmental. And all because, because the White Fang made Daddy even more of an asshole than he already was. Given what we're going to learn about Jacques the Destroyer in Volume 5, yeah, the White Fang should be like the least of your... He should be the least of the things you bitch about. Yeah. So then we see Sun Wukong for the first time, and I kind of have a small thing to talk about with Sun. I feel like Sun is one of those characters that most people in the fan base underestimate. Now, I like him because he's smarter than he seems. He kind of plays dumb. Now, admittedly, spoiler alert, Nora actually does this, admittedly, but I just kind of like Sun. I mean, I know some people just don't like him too much, but what can I say? I like Sun. I think he's a cool character. I'll get into a couple of reasons why in a bit. So my next note is about Penny Polodina, and I remember the rough version of my notes. Oh boy, she is so awkward in this volume. Yeah. The thing with her, if you can't tell, well, we'll get into it in Volume 2, because I actually have more to talk about with it in Volume 2. Let's just say there's a reason why when people ship her with RWBY, the ship name is Nuts and Bolts. So they kind of, sorry. So, when Penny points out that she's here to fight in the tournament, Weiss is like, forgive me, but you don't seem like the type. And it's like, oh, don't worry, I'm combat ready. And it's like, yeah, I don't see it. And then Blake just is like, says the girl wearing a dress, it's a combat skirt. Ruby speeds by, yeah. The high five. Well, it's actually more of a low five, but you get the point. I like the idea of combat skirts. Also, by the way, this is not a series that will give you panty shots. Not really, because, well, anti-upskirt technology, apparently. Yeah. Makes me wonder what Nora was so concerned about in Volume 4, but whatever. I know the idea is that we, the audience, don't get to see anything in the skirt, but the character still can, I guess, is the idea. So then they start arguing about the White Fang again, and Weiss describes the White Fang as pure evil. I don't buy that for a second. Given what we know now about Adam, and with the benefit of hindsight, I can believe he is pure evil at this point. But the White Fang as a whole, no, I don't see it. I'm sorry. Pure evil, does it exist? Well, now that I think about it, it does exist. In literally, at least 2 characters. Now, this is where they, so they continue to argue with it back at the dorm room, and Weiss gives her backstory about, I'm a victim, and about how, the White Fang pissed her dad off, and it made for some very unpleasant childhood time frame, and I'm sorry, Weiss, that's not full justification, Okay, they made your life harder. So what? I'm sorry, but your justification for hating the White Fang is actually way flimsier than Ilya's justification for hating humanity will be. And the fact that I'm referencing a character from who gets her start in Volume 4 of all places, yeah. So then Blake is revealed to be a faunus. Well, maybe we were just sick of being pushed around. And that just kind of ousts her as both a faunus and a White Fang member. Again, it's blatantly obvious if you're paying attention to the music and all the cues. What I find funny is that Penny actually saw through the bow before any of them. As did Sun, but I guess that makes sense. And it's because, I knew you looked better without the bow. Sun's lying. So then Blake and Sun talk. Well, Team RWBY is trying to find her, trying to find Blake. And she asks if Sun knows about the White Fang, and he's like, "Well, yeah. I don't think there's a single faunus on the planet that hasn't heard of them." And Sun also mentions that he can't stand the White Fang himself, and his reason is very simple. In Sun's eyes, they're a bunch of extremists. So, yeah, kind of makes sense in hindsight. And that just kind of reinforces my justification point from earlier with Weiss, so yeah. A whole 2 notes earlier, it was more in the rough version, but yeah. So this is where Blake basically says that you might as well have been born into the White Fang, which, given what we'll learn about her parents in Volume 4, yeah, that makes sense. It kind of baffles me that nobody recognized her, but and how she thought she could get away with hiding her fondness in his nature, but So, Team RWBY is trying to find Blake. Weiss is being a complete cunt. And is basically saying, yeah, when we find her, Ruby and Yang are just being like, let's hear her side of the story first. Let's actually have a brain in our head for crying out loud. God damn it. And Weiss is just being, yeah, and when we hear it, you'll see that I was right. And then Yang's just looking at her like, Weiss, what the hell? She's her teammate. And then she just looks, and then she says the line, my most hated line in this entire series. Not the absolute dumbest line in the entire series. That'll come in Volume 4, but... Well, let me put it to you this way. The note I have for this is the line, and then the words, fuck this line, all in caps. With 4 exclamation points. Yeah. And the line is, the innocent never wrong, Yang. I'm reminded of a live stream discussion that Laura actually did about Captain America Civil War, the MCU movie. Yeah, I agree with Laura. That kind of mentality is stupid. It may make sense, but it's still a stupid... I hate that mentality so much. Because the innocent can have plenty of reasons to run. They don't want to have the blame pinned on them. They don't want to be falsely accused. Or in the case of, say, the Winter Soldier, the Black Panther is coming to kill him, and he doesn't care to frickin' listen until Captain America points out, hey, T'Challa, maybe you should listen. It's kind of funny because it feels like that's what Weiss is doing, running from her problems. I thought the innocent never run, Yang. Or I thought the innocent never run, Weiss. So what the hell are you doing? Of course, Blake is not going to help. Is going to do something that won't help with this in Volume 3, but we'll get there when we get there. So then we get the docs. I am just about done. I literally have just 5 more notes. So they get to so Blake and Sun get to the docks, and the Wei Fang show up. I like the exchange that Blake and Sun have. Sun just looks at Blake and is just like, you really didn't think they were behind it, did you? And Blake was like, no, deep down I knew. I just didn't want to be right. I like that. I like that exchange. It actually shows competence on both sides, in my opinion. So then Blake threatens Roman, and is just asking the Wei Fang, why are you following him? And then Roman's just like, yeah, we're the Wei Fang and I have gone into business together. Tell me what it is, or I'll put an end to your little operation. And then another airship shows up, and it's like, yeah, it's not exactly a little operation. And while Blake is distracted, uses his cane weapon to cause an explosion to get him out of Blake's grip. And Roman basically fights off against both Blake and Sun, and this is the first time we get introduced to the gunchucks. Now, I mentioned I like Sun's weapon. The idea is that it's got 3 modes, which is one of the few triple modes that we have. Crescent Rose, for example, only has 2 modes. The sniper rifle and the scythe. Though the scythe can be used as a sniper rifle too. It's just, yeah. So, with Sun's weapon, you have, the quarterstaff. You have the quarterstaff. Then you have, the nunchucks. And those nunchucks also have, each nunchuck is basically a shotgun. I like that idea. Gunchucks. It's actually kind of awesome. And he's very good with it, too. Not every day you can combine the fight styles of two Ninja Turtles with arrows and add guns to the mix. So Penny and Ruby show up, and why, hello, Red. Isn't it past your bedtime? And then Penny's just like, Ruby, are these your friends too? Ooh. And then of course Ruby gets distracted. Heck, it's a Roman blasts her, and then that kind of cues in Penny to, yeah, these aren't my friends. These aren't the friends of my friend Ruby. So then she goes to confront them, and Ruby's like, "Whoa, no, wait, Penny, wait!" And then Penny just reiterates, "Don't worry, Ruby, I'm combat ready." And then she proceeds to mop the floor, or with the White Fang, and even fire off a giant fuck off laser of her own, and frickin' destroy a couple of airships, causing Roman to flee, which is just hilarious. So yeah, admittedly, Penny is combat ready and a bit OP, at least until Volume 3, but we'll get there. So Weiss forgives Blake. I guess the Yang got through or off screen, because the last we hear from Weiss is, "The innocent never run, Yang." Fuck that line. Just fuck that line. Again, pardon my language, but... And although she is still a little racist, admittedly, that is only towards Sun, and in hindsight, well, he is still a thief, so... Shrug. So, my last two notes... I realize I really have nothing to say. Cinder kind of had her moment at the first episode, and then she shows up for the post-credits scene, and it's just like, yes, we still have use for you, Roman, because the fan base just won't let us kill you off just yet, so it won't let us kill you off right now, so, yeah. Oops. Yeah, spoiler alert, he doesn't last past a certain point. So then Ozpin gets a message from Crow, the one and only contribution outside of Ruby's fight style that he has. And that is, Queen has pawns. I like that. I do like that. That's a hint of the idea that is present. And that is definitely going to come to a head in later volumes. So I'm out of notes. So like I said at the beginning of this, I'm actually surprised I actually liked Volume 1 as much as I did. I admittedly have been nervous about this video. It didn't help that I had to basically take these notes and basically wait a week to record this video, but, you know, time budget, or not budget, but, you know, time constraints on me last week just kind of ended that. So, yeah. But, regardless, that's all I have. So, I hope you've enjoyed my first video. Feel free to let me know how awful I was at it and what I can improve upon. And wow, I am actually surprised I got that under 2 hours. So, how long will Volume 2 be? I don't know. I guess we'll see when I do Volume 2 next time. So I'm going to go get to work to that. And in the meantime, this is Blue Wolf Alex of the Lore Walkers signing out. Have a good one, guys.